Harlem, New York City. In September 1948, Sadie Mae Washington was 30 years old, serving her community as a nurse at Harlem Hospital. Harlem Hospital was known as a lifeline for black families, a place where people fought to survive in a city that often ignored them. Harlem itself was a proud but strained neighborhood. Families worked long hours. Many struggled with poverty. Police power was strong, and trust in the system was weak. At the time, Sadie was one of the most respected young nurses in Harlem. She had delivered more than 300 babies. She worked the night shift for 7 straight years and never missed a day. She was known for kindness, discipline, and quiet strength. The environment rewarded silence and obedience, especially when dealing with police authority. It punished those who questioned official reports or challenged powerful men. When the police ruled her death a heart attack, most people felt they had no choice but to accept it. The system moved quickly. The case was closed within hours. No full autopsy was done. No public questions were asked. But Harlem was a place where people watched carefully. And some people did not believe what they were told. By September 1948, Bumpy Johnson had established himself as one of the most powerful men in Harlem. A former numbers runner who had survived knife fights, prison time, and years of gang conflict, he carried himself with calm control. He spoke quietly. He listened more than he talked. People knew he was capable of violence, but he did not act without reason. That restraint gave him power. Among the people of Harlem, he represented protection in a system dominated by corruption and outside control. Many feared him. Many respected him. Most understood that he enforced his own form of justice when official justice failed. Bumpy had known Sadie Mae Washington since she was a child. In 1926, when he was wounded in a knife fight, 8-year-old Sadie and her mother hid him in their apartment and treated his injuries. He never forgot it. Over the years, he helped her family when they needed support. When her father died, he paid for the funeral. When she needed money for nursing school, he provided it without interest. To the public, Sadie was a nurse. To Bumpy, she was family. On September 8, 1948, Sadie was kidnapped while walking home from her shift. 3 men from Connecticut, Vincent Marconi, Tommy Rakei, and Frank Calabrese, forced her into a blue Bic. A witness saw the abduction and wrote down the license plate number. She was taken to a warehouse near the East River. For 3 hours, she was tortured and questioned about her brother's debt to Marconi. She did not know where her brother was. Around 2:17 a.m., she was strangled. The next morning, police officers Patrick Donnelly and James Murphy responded to her apartment after her body was staged to look like a natural death. Donnelly accepted a $1,000 bribe from Marconi to rule it a heart attack. Detectives Robert Walsh and Frank Sullivan signed off on closing the case. Medical examiners Dr. Leonard Ashford and Dr. Philip Hartman signed the death certificate without a full autopsy. The case was officially closed. But on September 12, during her funeral at Mount Olivet Baptist Church, Bumpy noticed heavy makeup on her neck. He touched it and saw it was covering something. When the collar was pulled back, rope burns were visible. Cigarette burns and defensive wounds were also present. In front of more than 400 people, the truth became visible. Raymond Carter, the funeral director, admitted that Officer Donnelly had instructed him to cover the marks and had paid him $50. From that moment, the official story collapsed. Within days, Marconi and his 2 associates were located in the Bronx. They wrote signed confessions detailing the kidnapping, torture, and bribe. Soon after, all 3 were found dead in the East River. Police Commissioner Thomas Hendris reopened the case. Donnelly resigned, was arrested, and later fled New York. Murphy was transferred to desk duty. Walsh and Sullivan resigned. Dr. Ashford resigned. Dr. Hartman was transferred and demoted. 6 officials were removed from positions of authority. Sadie Mae Washington's death certificate was corrected. Cause of death: strangulation. By the end of that week, Harlem understood something clearly. The system had failed. But the truth had not been buried. Sadie was laid to rest at Woodlawn Cemetery. Her gravestone reads, "Nurse, Healer, Angel of Harlem." Her story became a warning. And a reminder. In a place where silence was rewarded and questions were punished, one funeral exposed what power tried to hide. But not everyone respected Sadie Mae Washington. One figure in particular, Vincent Marconi, embodied danger. Marconi was a 42-year-old loan shark from New Haven, Connecticut. He was known for harsh collections and for using force when debts were not paid. His associates, Tommy Rakei and Frank Calabrese, worked as his muscle and driver. Together, they handled unpaid loans with threats and violence. Marconi believed that money owed to him was more important than human life. In January 1948, Marcus Washington, Sadie's younger brother, borrowed $800 from him. The interest was 20% per month, compounded. By March, the debt had grown past $1,000. Marcus could not pay and disappeared. By September, the debt had passed $2,000. Marconi did not care that Sadie was not responsible for her brother's actions. He drove to Harlem and watched her apartment for 3 days. On the night of September 8, 1948, he and his men forced her into a blue Bic on 141st Street. A witness saw the kidnapping and wrote down the license plate number. They took Sadie to a warehouse near the East River. For 3 hours, Marconi demanded to know where Marcus was. She said she did not know. He used rope, cigarettes, and his fists. Around 2:17 a.m., he strangled her. Marconi had learned how to operate without immediate consequence. In the past, he had been arrested twice but never convicted. Witnesses had disappeared. Cases had collapsed. He understood how to pay the right people and close the right doors. After Sadie's death, he did not panic. He made a phone call. He contacted Officer Patrick Donnelly of the NYPD's 28th Precinct. Donnelly had been on his payroll for 2 years. Marconi paid him $1,000 to rule the death a heart attack. To Marconi, this was not murder. It was business. He believed that with money and connections, he could control the outcome. Marconi continued his behavior by exploiting corruption inside the system. Officer Patrick Donnelly arrived at Sadie's apartment and saw the signs of violence. There were rope burns on her neck and bruises on her body. Instead of opening a homicide investigation, he declared it a natural death. His partner, Officer James Murphy, did not object. Detectives Robert Walsh and Frank Sullivan signed off on closing the case within 6 hours. No serious investigation was started. No questions were asked. At the medical examiner's office, Dr. Leonard Ashford and Dr. Philip Hartman signed the death certificate without performing a full autopsy. They did not remove the heavy makeup placed on Sadie's neck. They did not examine the rope burns closely. The official cause of death was listed as cardiac arrest. Raymond Carter, the funeral director, was instructed by Donnelly to use heavy makeup to cover any marks on the body. Donnelly paid him $50 for his silence. Carter feared for his business and complied. Authority tolerated this because corruption had become routine. Officers accepted bribes. Detectives closed cases quickly to avoid problems. Medical officials trusted police reports without question. Challenging the system could cost a man his career. In Harlem, many residents believed the police did not protect them. They believed reports were written to protect officers, not victims. This belief came from years of experience. Because of this pattern, Marconi felt secure. He believed the death would remain a heart attack on paper. He believed no one would challenge it. The victim was a black nurse in Harlem. The suspects were white men from Connecticut with money and connections. Over time, Marconi had come to believe himself untouchable. He believed that a bribe could erase rope burns. He believed that paperwork could replace truth. He believed that fear would keep witnesses silent. For a short time, the system proved him right. The case was closed. The death certificate was signed. The funeral was arranged. But the system did not account for one detail. At the funeral, the heavy makeup could not fully hide what had been done. And once the marks were seen by hundreds of witnesses, the official story began to break. The first incident occurred during a routine moment inside Sadie Mae Washington's apartment on the morning of September 9, 1948. Officer Patrick Donnelly stood over her body. He saw the rope burns on her neck. He saw the bruises on her face. He saw the torn fingernails and the marks on her arms. These were not small signs. They were clear signs of violence. Without overt escalation, Donnelly made a quiet decision. He told his partner they would write the report as a heart attack. He said she had fallen and struck her face. He chose paperwork over truth. There was no shouting. No public argument. Just a pen moving across a form. Later that same evening, Donnelly visited Raymond Carter, the funeral director. He told him to cover any marks on the body with heavy makeup. He gave him $50. He said it was to protect the family from pain. The instruction was calm. The meaning was clear. This was the first public act of disrespect toward Sadie's life. Her death was reduced to a full sentence on a report. Her suffering was hidden under cosmetics. The system moved forward as if nothing had happened. At the time, Bumpy Johnson had only heard that she died of a heart attack. He did not yet know the details. He did not storm the police station. He did not accuse anyone. He waited. To many observers, this appeared as weakness. Some in Harlem whispered that even Bumpy could not challenge the police. The case had been closed in 6 hours. The official report was signed. What could one man do against that? But Bumpy did not act without proof. He had learned long ago that moving too fast could destroy a case before it began. The second routine moment came on Sunday, September 12th, during the funeral at Mount Olivet Baptist Church. More than 400 people filled the pews. Reverend Adam Clayton Powell Jr. spoke from the pulpit. The organ played softly. Sadie lay in her casket, dressed in white. Bumpy noticed the makeup first. It was thick. Too thick for a heart attack. He had seen many funerals. Natural deaths did not require layers of foundation on the neck. Without anger, without raising his voice, he walked to the casket. He touched the makeup with his fingers. It came away heavy and dark on his skin. He did not shout. He did not accuse anyone. He simply asked the funeral director why so much makeup had been used. Again, he chose calm over chaos. To some in the church, his slow movements looked uncertain. Why did he not confront the police immediately? Why did he not make a scene? But Bumpy was not searching for attention. He was searching for truth. When he gently moved the collar and revealed the rope burns, the room erupted. But his voice remained steady. He had waited until the right moment. Those close to Bumpy Johnson expected a different reaction. Illinois Gordon and others who worked with him knew his history. They knew he had faced down armed men before. They expected anger when he first heard of Sadie's death. They expected immediate retaliation when he read the anonymous note about the kidnapping. But restraint was deliberate. When the note was slipped under his office door, he did not rush into the streets. He did not accuse the police without evidence. He ordered information first. He had the license plate traced. He gathered names of officers who responded. He waited for facts. He understood that acting without proof would allow the system to dismiss him as reckless. Those who understood the environment recognized patience as strategy. Harlem in 1948 was a place where official power was strong. Police reports carried weight. Medical certificates ended questions. A single accusation against the NYPD could be ignored or punished. Bumpy knew that the system protected itself. If he acted too soon, the case would vanish completely. So he allowed the funeral to proceed. He allowed the official story to stand for one more hour. Then, in front of witnesses, he revealed what the paperwork had tried to hide. To outsiders, his silence had looked like acceptance. To those who knew him, it was calculation. He understood that truth, once seen by hundreds of people, could not easily be buried again. His patience was not weakness. It was preparation. And once the truth was visible, events moved quickly. The next incident occurred 1 day later at the 28th precinct. After the funeral, Bumpy Johnson went to see Detective Robert Walsh. He did not bring weapons. He did not threaten the desk officers. He carried a folder. Inside were photographs and bank records showing Walsh had taken money from criminals for years. This time, the provocation was worse. It was not only the murder. It was proof that officers had closed the case on purpose. They had signed papers knowing the truth was hidden. Again, Bumpy remained restrained. He did not attack Walsh. He did not expose him publicly that morning. He placed the evidence on the desk and gave him 48 hours to find the men responsible. Each incident increased Vincent Marconi's confidence. He believed the police were protecting him. He believed the case would fade. In environments like this, confidence becomes dangerous. The next incident occurred Monday evening at Raymond Carter's funeral home. Bumpy met with Carter to confirm what Officer Donnelly had said. Carter admitted Donnelly instructed him to cover the rope burns and paid him for silence. Carter also revealed that a blue Bic had been parked outside that night, watching to ensure the cover-up was completed. This time, the provocation was clearer. The killers were not only violent. They were careful. They wanted to make sure the lie held. Again, Bumpy remained restrained. He did not harm Carter. He did not accuse him publicly. He asked him to write down every detail and sign it. Each incident increased Marconi's belief that his plan was working. The death was ruled natural. The funeral was nearly complete. The system had cooperated. In environments like this, confidence becomes dangerous. The next incident occurred Tuesday morning in the South Bronx. Detective Walsh located Marconi and his two associates hiding at the home of Marconi's cousin. The blue Bic was in the garage. They were close to leaving the city. This time, the provocation was worse because it showed no regret. The men were calm. They had not surrendered. They had not confessed to authorities. They believed they would return to Connecticut without consequence. Again, Bumpy remained restrained during the approach. He waited until night. He cut phone lines. He surrounded the house quietly. There was no public display. Each incident increased the killer's confidence. They believed distance from Harlem meant safety. In environments like this, confidence becomes dangerous. The next incident occurred at midnight inside the Bronx house. When confronted, Vincent Marconi tried to speak. He said it was business. He said they were only collecting a debt. He treated Sadie's death as a mistake, not a crime. This time, the provocation was moral. The lack of remorse was clear. He spoke of money while holding the memory of torture. Again, Bumpy remained restrained. He did not strike them immediately. He demanded written confessions. He required them to describe the kidnapping, the torture, the bribe, and the falsified report. Each incident increased the weight of what had happened. The written words made it real. In environments like this, confidence becomes dangerous. The next incident occurred early Wednesday morning at the East River. Marconi, Ray Kai, and Calabrese were taken to the same area where Sadie had been tortured. They had confessed in writing. They had named Officer Donnelly. They had admitted the bribe and the strangulation. This time, the provocation was complete. The truth was confirmed. There was no doubt. Again, Bumpy remained controlled. There was no shouting. No prolonged violence. The act was fast. The three men were thrown into the river, chained with weights. Their confidence ended in silence. In environments like this, confidence becomes fatal. Everything changed when Sadie's body was revealed in front of more than 400 people at Mount Olivet Baptist Church. When Bumpy moved the collar and exposed the rope burns, it was no longer rumor. It was visible proof. Mothers, fathers, church leaders, and children saw the marks of strangulation. They saw the cigarette burns. They saw the defensive wounds. This incident crossed a line. It was no longer about a private debt. It was no longer about one corrupt officer. It was about a nurse who had delivered more than 300 babies, tortured and killed, and then erased by paperwork. Authority response before that moment had been minimal. The case was closed in 6 hours. No serious investigation was done. The death certificate was signed without a full autopsy. The funeral was arranged under false cause of death. From that moment, the outcome became inevitable. The truth had been exposed in public. The church had witnessed it. The community knew. Once the rope burns were seen, silence was no longer possible. And once silence ended, consequences followed. That evening, after the funeral, Bumpy Johnson returned to his office. The room was quiet. The city outside moved as it always did. Cars passed. Music drifted from nearby clubs. Harlem was alive, but inside that office, the mood was different. Illinois Gordon sat across from him. A few trusted men stood near the wall. No one spoke at first. Bumpy removed his hat and placed it on the desk. He looked at the note with the license plate number. He looked at the signed statement from Raymond Carter. He looked at the names of the officers who had closed the case. He did not raise his voice. He did not curse. He did not threaten. He spoke slowly. Sadie Mae Washington was murdered, he said. They tried to hide it. They wrote heart attack. They paid money to close the file. He paused. That will not stand. There was no anger in his tone. Only certainty. He continued, we will find the men who took her. We will make sure they admit what they did. And we will deal with the officers who helped them. He did not describe how. He did not explain what form justice would take. He simply said, everyone who touched this will answer for it. Those who heard him understood the meaning. Illinois nodded once. He knew Bumpy did not make empty promises. If he said something would happen, it would happen. There was no need for threats. The calm in his voice was stronger than shouting. Outside that office, Harlem was still grieving. Mothers were crying. Men were angry. The newspaper had not yet printed the truth. The official record still said heart attack. But inside that room, the path forward had been decided. Bumpy picked up Sadie's photograph from her nursing school graduation. He looked at her face. She saved my life when she was 8 years old, he said quietly. Now I will make sure her death means something. No one questioned him. The decision had been made. The setting of the final incident was ordinary. It was Tuesday night in the South Bronx. A quiet residential street. Small houses. Dim streetlights. A few cars parked along the curb. Neighbors inside watching late television or preparing for sleep. Inside one house, Vincent Marconi and his 2 associates believed they were safe. The blue Bic sat in the garage. The lights in the house were on. There was no sign of panic. Routine continued as usual. Marconi ate dinner. Rakai checked the windows. Calabrese smoked near the back door. They spoke in low voices about returning to Connecticut soon. They believed the funeral had passed. They believed the police report had closed the matter. Across the street, 2 cars sat quietly in the dark. Inside them, Bumpy and his men waited. No sirens. No flashing lights. No shouting. At 11:47 p.m., the lights inside the house went out one by one. The neighborhood grew still. A dog barked somewhere in the distance. Then silence. At 12:30 a.m., the routine broke. Phone lines were cut. The garage car was disabled. Doors were covered. Windows watched. The house looked the same from the outside. The street remained calm. But inside, everything changed. When Marconi opened his bedroom door, he did not see police officers. He saw Illinois standing in the hallway. Downstairs, Rakai and Calabrese were already on their knees. The quiet street did not know what was happening behind closed walls. The contrast made what followed unforgettable. Hours later, before sunrise, the East River flowed as it always had. Dark water moving under pale sky. No crowds. No witnesses. Just the sound of current against stone. It was an ordinary river on an ordinary morning. But beneath its surface, 3 men would soon disappear. The city would wake to headlines. Officers would be called to offices. Resignations would be signed. Arrests would follow. Yet in that moment, before the sun rose, the world looked unchanged. That is what made it unforgettable. Justice did not arrive with noise. It arrived quietly, in the dark, after a promise had been made and understood. The final provocation came inside the Bronx house, just after midnight. Vincent Marconi stood in the hallway holding a gun. He had heard movement downstairs. When he opened his bedroom door and saw armed men in his home, he did not surrender at first. He raised the weapon. This time, there was no ambiguity. He was not speaking about business. He was not claiming misunderstanding. He was not hiding behind police paperwork. He was armed, inside a safe house, prepared to defend what he had done. Downstairs, Tommy Rakai and Frank Calabrese tried to reach for the back door. They understood that the protection they had paid for was gone. There were no officers arriving to protect them. No legal shield. No official report to hide behind. Marone looked down the hallway and saw Illinois standing steady. Behind him, Bumpy Johnson stepped into view. Marone's face changed. He understood immediately. The man whose family he had destroyed was standing in front of him. He tried to speak. He said it was only a debt. He said it was never meant to end in death. He said he had children. But this time, his words carried no weight. This was the final escalation. A man who had tortured a nurse now stood with a gun in his hand, still trying to justify it. Bumpy did not shout. He did not rush forward. He stood. He looked at Marone with calm eyes. There was no fear in his posture. No hesitation. Only decision. In that narrow hallway, the truth was simple. The murder had been committed. The cover-up had been paid for. The confessions would soon be written. There would be no turning back. According to witnesses present, everything happened in seconds. When Marone hesitated with the gun in his hand, Illinois stepped forward and ordered him to drop it. The command was clear. Direct. Marone saw the numbers against him. He saw the control in their faces. His confidence broke. He dropped the weapon. Downstairs, Rakai and Calabrese were already forced to their knees. Hands behind their heads. No struggle lasted long. The movements were precise. Controlled. Professional. The house was secured quickly. Phone lines were cut. Doors were guarded. The blue Bic in the garage was disabled. Before any outside intervention was possible, the outcome was decided. The men were taken from the house without noise. No gunshots. No shouting in the street. Neighbors remained unaware. The night stayed quiet. Later, at the warehouse near the East River, the same place where Sadie had been tortured, the final decision was carried out. There was no drawn-out chaos. No spectacle. Each man was confronted with his own written confession. Each admitted the kidnapping, the torture, the rope, the bribe to Officer Donnelly. Bumpy listened without emotion. When the time came, the action was fast. Chains were secured. Weights attached. One by one, they were taken to the river's edge. There were no long speeches. No anger in the air. Only consequence. Before sunrise, the East River closed over them. By the time the city woke, the men who believed themselves untouchable were gone. Their confidence had carried them too far. Their protection had failed. Their money had run out of power. And in less than a minute of controlled action, the outcome was sealed. Wednesday morning, after the bodies were found in the East River, the city began to react. Police officers searched the Bronx house. They recovered written confessions from Vincent Marconi, Tommy Rakai, and Frank Calabrese. The confessions described the kidnapping, the torture, and the bribe paid to Officer Patrick Donnelly. By midday, word had spread through Harlem. Bumpy Johnson did not hide. He did not leave the city. He did not deny what had happened. He remained in his office, calm and visible. When officers arrived to question him, he stood up without argument. He adjusted his coat and walked with them. He did not resist authority. He did not raise his voice. Those watching from the street expected confrontation. They expected shouting. They expected violence. There was none. Inside the station, he answered carefully. He spoke about the funeral. He spoke about the rope burns. He spoke about the false police report. He did not confess to throwing anyone into the river. He did not accuse without proof. Before being escorted out of the questioning room, he delivered a single, final line. She was a nurse, he said. And she deserved the truth. He said nothing more. He was released later that day. There was not enough evidence to charge him. The confessions described the murder and the bribe, but they did not describe what happened after. Bumpy walked back into Harlem without celebration. Without speeches. The matter, in his view, was finished. The antagonists did not survive the river, but the system that protected them did. Officer Patrick Donnelly resigned and was arrested. He later fled New York. Officer James Murphy was transferred to desk duty in Staten Island. Detectives Robert Walsh and Frank Sullivan resigned from the force. Dr. Leonard Ashford resigned as chief medical examiner. Dr. Philip Hartman was transferred and demoted. They were not dead, but their authority was broken. The NYPD faced public pressure. Newspapers printed the details. The corrected autopsy confirmed strangulation. The official record was changed. Harlem watched closely. Behavior across the environment changed. Police officers understood that closing a case too quickly could bring scrutiny. Detectives understood that paperwork could be examined. Medical examiners understood that signatures carried responsibility. Funeral directors understood that silence had consequences. In Harlem, people spoke Sadie Mae Washington's name with respect. Her second funeral drew more than 800 people. The casket was open again, this time without heavy makeup. The truth was no longer hidden. Reverend Adam Clayton Powell Jr. spoke openly about the failure of the system. He did not mention revenge. He spoke about accountability. The message required no repetition. 3 killers were dead. 6 officials were removed from power. A false report had been exposed in front of hundreds of witnesses. No speech could add more to that. Bumpy Johnson returned to his routine. He ran his operations quietly. He did not boast. He did not explain himself in public. Those who needed to understand already did. The system had been forced to correct itself, not through internal discipline alone, but through public exposure and undeniable proof. Sadie Mae Washington was buried at Woodlawn Cemetery. Her gravestone named her a nurse and healer. It did not mention rope burns. It did not mention corruption. But Harlem remembered. In the months that followed, officers were slower to dismiss suspicious deaths. Detectives were more careful with paperwork. The community was more willing to question official answers. No formal announcement declared change. It simply happened. The lesson was clear. When authority fails and truth is hidden, someone will uncover it. And once uncovered, it cannot be buried again. Sadie's life ended at 30 years old. Her death forced a reckoning. The message traveled without noise, without slogans, without repetition. Justice, once visible, reshapes everything around it. When events were reviewed, a pattern emerged. At first, it was a simple report. A young nurse found dead on her bedroom floor. Cause of death, heart attack. Case closed in 6 hours. But once the rope burns were seen in the church, everything was reopened. Investigators looked again at the timeline. On September 8, 1948, at 11:32 p.m., Sadie Mae Washington was seen being forced into a blue Bic on 141st Street. A witness wrote down the license plate number. The car was registered to Vincent Marconi of New Haven, Connecticut. 16 hours later, she was dead. That was the first sign of escalation. Marcus Washington had borrowed $800 in January. The interest was 20% per month. By March, the debt had grown past $1,000. By September, it had doubled again. Marconi did not forgive debts. He increased pressure. He drove to Harlem. He watched Sadie's building for 3 days. That was the warning. Then came the kidnapping. She was taken to a warehouse near the East River. For 3 hours, she was beaten and questioned. Rope was placed around her neck. Cigarettes were pressed against her skin. When she could not give information she did not have, she was strangled. That was escalation. After the murder, the body was returned to her apartment and placed on the floor. It was staged to look natural. That was deception. Officer Patrick Donnelly arrived at the scene. He saw marks on her neck and bruises on her body. Instead of calling homicide detectives, he ruled it a heart attack. That was system failure. Detectives Robert Walsh and Frank Sullivan signed off on closing the case without a full investigation. That was another failure. Dr. Leonard Ashford and Dr. Philip Hartman signed the death certificate without performing a complete autopsy. They did not question the heavy makeup on the neck. That was validation of a false story. Raymond Carter, the funeral director, admitted he was instructed to cover the marks. He was paid $50 for silence. Donnelly admitted receiving $1,000 from Marconi. The written confessions recovered from the Bronx house described the kidnapping, torture, and bribe in detail. The times matched the witness statement. The license plate matched the car. The warehouse location matched the injuries. The evidence aligned. Escalation. Warnings ignored. System failure. When Commissioner Thomas Hendris reviewed the case, he had photographs from the second viewing at the church. The rope burns were clear. The cigarette burns were visible. The defensive wounds on her hands showed she had fought back. The revised autopsy confirmed strangulation. The conclusion was unavoidable. Sadie Mae Washington had not died from heart failure. She had been kidnapped, tortured, and killed. Police officers had falsified reports. Detectives had approved the closure. Medical examiners had failed to examine properly. Each step had built on the previous one. A debt led to threats. Threats led to abduction. Abduction led to torture. Torture led to murder. Murder led to bribery. Bribery led to false paperwork. False paperwork led to public exposure. And public exposure led to consequence. When the events were placed side by side, no single moment stood alone. Each action supported the next. The witness on 141st Street wrote down the license plate. That small act preserved truth. The heavy makeup at the funeral raised suspicion. That visual detail broke the official story. The confessions confirmed the sequence. They removed doubt. The resignations that followed were not random. They were connected to specific failures. Officer Donnelly accepted money and falsified a report. Detectives Walsh and Sullivan closed the case without investigation. Dr. Ashford and Dr. Hartman signed documents without full examination. Each had a role. The review showed more than a murder. It showed a system willing to protect itself before protecting a victim. The pattern was clear. When power is unchecked, confidence grows. When confidence grows, violence increases. When violence is hidden, corruption deepens. But when truth is made visible, the structure changes. The final report corrected the cause of death to strangulation. The names of those involved were recorded. The newspaper printed the facts. The community saw the chain of events. There was no mystery left. The evidence formed a straight line from debt to death to cover-up. The conclusion was unavoidable. Sadie Mae Washington had been failed by criminals and by the system meant to protect her. Once that truth was written clearly, it could not be denied again. Long after the incident, the story continued to circulate. It was told in barbershops and church halls. It was repeated at kitchen tables and on street corners. Mothers told their children about the nurse who worked nights and never missed a day. Older men spoke quietly about the funeral where the truth was revealed in front of hundreds of witnesses. The story did not survive because of spectacle. There were no public trials for the killers. There were no long courtroom speeches. The final moments happened in the dark, away from cameras and headlines. The story survived because of meaning. Sadie Mae Washington had delivered more than 300 babies. She had cared for the sick. She had walked the same streets every day without fear. Her life represented service. Her death revealed corruption. People remembered the moment when heavy makeup was wiped away and rope burns were seen. They remembered how a closed case was reopened by simple observation. They remembered how a false report could not survive public truth. In places like Harlem in 1948, official answers were often accepted without question. Many believed challenging authority would bring punishment, not justice. But this case showed something different. It showed that silence can protect wrongdoing. It showed that paperwork can hide violence. It showed that fear can delay truth. But it also showed that truth, once exposed in the open, cannot easily be buried again. Police officers became more careful. Medical examiners became more thorough. Detectives understood that signatures carried weight. The community understood that watching closely mattered. No monument was built for the confrontation at the church. No plaque marked the warehouse near the East River. Yet the memory endured. Sadie was laid to rest at Woodlawn Cemetery. Her gravestone named her a nurse, a healer, an angel of Harlem. It did not list the details of rope or fire or corruption. It did not mention bribes or resignations. Those details lived in memory. The meaning was simple. A life devoted to helping others was taken by greed. A system failed to protect her. But the failure was exposed. And those responsible, whether criminals or officials, did not continue as before. Years later, when people spoke about justice in Harlem, they spoke her name. Not because it was dramatic. Not because it was violent. But because it proved that truth could be forced into the light. In places like this, power is respected, but truth is remembered. When the system closes its eyes, someone must decide whether to look away or to see.